Do you enjoy the harvest of Missouri through food, fuel, or fiber? Interested in strengthening your community or making a difference in the lives of others? You're in the right place. This is Stand for Ag with Missouri Farmers Care. Join us for thoughtful conversations around the intersections of farmer, rancher, and consumer interests. Grab a seat, press play, and join the conversation.
Welcome back to this episode of Stand for Ag. I am here at the Ozarks Food Harvest Regional Food Bank in Springfield, Missouri, and I'm going to go ahead and let our very special guest introduce himself and tell us a little bit about where we're sitting today.
Hi there, my name is Jordan Browning. I'm the Public Information Officer for Ozarks Food Harvest, and we are currently at Ozarks Food Harvest, the Southwest Missouri Feeding America Food Bank.
Awesome. Could you just tell us a little bit about the history of this regional food bank and how it services the agencies that that fall under it?
Sure. We were started in 1983 with a very small pantry that was falling under the Council of Churches, and then in 1991 we broke off and fell under the Feeding America umbrella. And so we continued to service food, and then we moved into the building we're in now in 2009 to expand our capacity. And in 2018, we built our second warehouse to expand that as well. So now with that, we are distributing roughly about 20 million meals each and every year.
Awesome. And then how many agencies do you service? What does the demographic look like there?
Gotcha. Yeah, so with Ozarks Food Harvest, we have about 270 different agencies spread across a 28 county service area, or roughly about a third of the state of Missouri. The average demographic of the people we're seeing is usually it's going to be 2 to 3 members in a household, typically going to be female, making less than about $20,000 per year. Typically is going to rent their home and usually has a high school education. And that's a large part of the education that we try and do at Ozarks Food Harvest, to try and get away from some of those stereotypes that we might have about people that are struggling with food insecurity.
Yeah. I know that we had a warehouse tour previously before this. So
yes.
You were talking about the large volume of food that you get and how that's distributed. Could you tell us a little bit about what it looks like front to back? So from the time it enters your warehouse to the time it goes out to a family in need.
Yes. So when the food is brought into our warehouse, typically it's going to be a truck shipment or something that we've picked up. Mm-hmm. It will then go into our salvage room to make sure that none of the product is contaminated, because we want to make sure not to harm any other food product that's currently sitting in our warehouse. From there, it has gone into our sorting room, and so with the help of roughly about 16 volunteers, we are going to be sorting product of about 100,000 pounds of food per week. And that's to make sure that all of that product is safe before it goes out to our agencies. We also make sure to train our agencies on service safe protocol as well, just in case anything slips through, they can still identify that before it reaches their families in need.
Awesome. And so obviously you mentioned 16 volunteers. Is there any other staff that helps support those volunteers while they're here? What does your full-time staff look like?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have a whole team of volunteer coaches that are helping support that volunteer team through just education, making sure things are getting sorted correctly, there to answer questions. But we are super dependent on our volunteers. I mean, without them, we would have to hire an additional 15 full-time employees. Mm-hmm. So that's a really great way that allows us to spend more of our funds on purchasing food for families in Southwest Missouri. As far as our staffing right now, we have roughly about 80 full-time staff broken up between our warehousing staff and our office and programming staff.
Okay, so programming staff, what does that look like? What programming do they do throughout the year?
Gotcha. So we have our SFSP and our CACFP coordinator. So that covers our after school and our summer school feeding programs. We have our monitoring coordinators, so they go out to make sure all of our agencies are following protocols as far as safe refrigeration, safe storage, and safe distribution of the food that's provided to them. We also have a SNAP outreach coordinator who connects folks with the SNAP or food stamp program to make sure that they can get those benefits as well. And we also have a senior box coordinator, and they organize our distribution of more than 4,000 boxes each and every month.
So the after-school program, the boxes, all of that, what do those look like? What kind of stuff are you trying to get to the children for after-school programs or for the weekend programs? And then how does that transition down into your agencies?
Gotcha. So kind of the way it works with our distribution is the majority of our food distribution is going through our food pantries and feeding sites to making sure that we're getting at that family unit first. And then with some of our programs, we're trying to fill the gaps that maybe people that may be falling through the cracks in our food distribution. So a perfect example is our weekend backpack program. We're doing roughly about 57,000 bags per year. And so what we're trying to do there is children that are on the free and reduced lunch program, they may have access to 2 dedicated meals throughout the week, but then when the weekend comes, they no longer have access to those dedicated meals. So we're fulfilling that gap with our weekend bag program by making sure it's filled with protein items, vegetable items, fruit items, all USDA certified food product, to make sure that there's no barrier there and that they're getting the correct nutrients at that very specific time in their lives.
Yeah.
Along with our summer school feeding programs and our after school feeding programs, it's trying to fill those gaps to make sure that kids have access to a dedicated dinner, and then making sure when they go on summer break that they don't have 3 months where they're going without food, because all of those are very, very formative years for the kids for the kids in Southwest Missouri.
Yeah. So you've mentioned USDA a couple times.
Yes.
Where does your funding come from? So I assume USDA has some hand in that with their outreach programs. Do they supply all of your funding? How does the funding breakdown look for your guys' food bank?
It's a mixture of public and private resources. So some of our food donations we get from major grocers, could be Walmart, AWG, grocers like that. And then some products we also receive from the USDA. But the programs that we get through them, for example, TFAP, which stands for the Emergency Food Assistance Program, is great because it's actually the USDA is purchasing food from farmers within the United States and then taking that food, giving it to food banks like ours, which can then be distributed to families in need. So it's a great program to not only support our farmers in the United States, but supporting families in need.
Yeah, that is really awesome. I know a big mission of probably all of agriculture is to support the farmers, and if any way we can get products that are grown directly from the farmer to people that are in need, that is a great mission to have. Whenever we were taking our trip through the warehouse, you had stopped and talked about the garden that you have.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about that and how that is supporting your guys' donations as well?
Yeah, so we have a garden in Rogersville where we're actually able to produce more than 11,000 pounds of fresh produce every single year. And that's great because so many times before this, we just reflected in the donations we had, we weren't able to offer as much fresh produce as we wanted. But now that we have some control of that sector, we can actually get some fresh items out to families that are really, really wanting it. And not only is that helping them with their food selection, but that's really helping with the nutrition status of so many people that may not be able to afford those kind of items.
Cool. And you have a Glean team. So
Yes.
what is your volunteer demographic look like there?
Yes, so our volunteer for sorting food in the warehouse, our Glean team, those overlap.
Okay.
So with our Glean team, it's great because we work with local farmers who can contact us and say, hey, we happen to have a field full of onions. If you can come get them, they are yours.
Okay.
And so our volunteers can go out there, pick that. And I believe even last week we had gotten 500 pounds worth of onions that we've been able to distribute to our agencies. So it's a great thing to not only being able to help a farmer, but they're actually helping out their local community right here within Southwest Missouri.
What do you do with 500 pounds of onions?
We distribute that out as best we can among our agencies, and that just depends on the availability, how they look, what they look like, to make sure that we're not giving out any kind of rough-looking product. So yeah, it just kind of depends on our agencies in need at the time.
Okay, so anything, obviously you guys, it comes in, it decontaminates, you sort it, make sure it's all in good shape. What about the stuff that doesn't go out? So you have an online ordering system, which we'll circle back and talk about.
Yes.
What happens if it doesn't get used in time?
Correct. Yeah, and that's a big issue, is that we don't want to be able to throw away product that may have some second life use. So we actually work with local hog farmers so that even if we have to get rid of some product that's not fit for human consumption, that they can use it within either feeding their hogs or putting it on their farmland to make sure that it's still getting some use. Because one of the biggest parts of this is trying to do food rescue. Because right now we're rescuing more than 67 semi-truckloads worth of food monthly. So we're doing that to make sure that no product is going to waste here within Southwest Missouri.
Yeah, that's a big sustainability issue, is food waste. We have a lot of food. We have farmers that produce it abundantly. How do we get it in the hands of the people that need it? And this is obviously the middle ground there, trying to help bridge that gap. But you have talked about some of the weird shipments that you've gotten whenever we were walking in. So just share a little bit with our listeners about what those shipments look like, how they're sourced, who kind of communicates with the Walmarts and grocery stores of the land and then how it gets here?
Yeah, so we have a whole staff person dedicated to managing those relationships. Our retail store coordinator, so she actually works with Walmart and all of our local grocers to make sure that none of that food product is being wasted, because we can come pick it up and make sure that it goes to someone who needs it.
Yeah.
So far this year, just with our retail store coordination, we've been able to pick up 7 million pounds that otherwise would have gone to a landfill.
Awesome.
And so we've been able to not only connect to that with OFH, but if it happens to be in a very rural section of Southwest Missouri, we can actually directly connect them with an agency. So that way we can cut out the middleman of having to ship it back to Springfield before it goes back out to that county.
Cool. And the weird things that are in the shipments.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I know how funny this was for me to listen to. So I want to pass that pleasure on to our listeners.
Yeah, so with our shipments, sometimes we get a variety of objects that may be expired that they no longer have use for. So sometimes we get pet food, sometimes we get medicine like ibuprofen. The strangest one we've received is a blood pressure monitor that you may see near the prescription aisle at your local Walmart. Which took us a month or two to figure out what to do with, but I believe it has a nice home at a senior center now.
Yeah.
So it's still getting a second life.
Yeah, we were talking about this. I was like, I know how many times I've taken my blood pressure on one of those things, because that was all you did whenever you go to the store with your grandparents. You're like waiting in line. I'm going to check my blood pressure as a 10-year-old, and it's a great tool. But what do you do with it at a food bank?
Yeah, I mean the first day everybody got their blood pressure checked, so it ended up being a great tool for us, and then we pass it along to an agency.
This podcast is brought to you by Missouri soybean farmers and their checkoff. The Missouri Soybean Merchandising Council is a farmer-run organization dedicated to improving the profitability of the Missouri soybean farmer through a combination of marketing, research, and commercialization programs. The checkoff is committed to empowering Missouri soybean farmers through innovation. The council is run by the farmer for the farmer, with 13 farmer leaders from across the Show Me State. To find out more, visit mosoy.org.
So with the pet food and things obviously not fit for human consumption, where do those go, and how do you help out other communities with that?
Yeah, so that's a great thing that we offer through our local shelters. So that way they can benefit from those products as well. Because as you said, we don't have any use for pet food here, but we can make sure that it's still getting a life among agencies and other nonprofits that can use it.
Cool. So we talked about the online ordering system. I want to kind of circle back to that, because I think it's really cool how technology is really taking shape in fighting food insecurity as well. So what does it look like if I'm an agency and I am in your service area? If I want to go online and order food, how does that look like for me? What is the process? Do I have to pay anything for it? How does that work?
Gotcha. So no, there's actually no payment involved to access that online ordering system.
Okay.
So when our agencies go on to our online ordering system, it lists all of the product that we have available here at Ozarks Food Harvest. What we used to see among our agencies is that we were trying to distribute food without really recognizing what their capacity was or what the needs of their population was. So this online ordering system allows them to choose specifically the food that's going to fit their needs and what they're actually able to store. Because there's going to be a giant difference between a pantry in Greene County that serves 150 families per month versus a very rural agency that maybe only serves 25 families per month. But it's great because they're able to see that exact product and be able to fulfill the needs that they need for their individual agency.
Yeah, and what is the qualifications for if, I don't know how, if you go into a field and how does it get USDA inspected? What is the qualifications it has to have to go out to an agency for them to order it online?
Do you mean like to become an agency, or for the food product?
For the food product to get out there. So does it have to be USDA inspected? Does it have to be state inspected? In terms of like USDA qualifications is what I'm trying to get at.
Oh, so I think what you're asking is like, so when the food is being processed from here, like what is that, that process that goes through here? Yeah,
so like does your facility have to be USDA inspected at all?
Oh yeah, so we get inspected through like our AIB certification. Feeding America comes out to inspect us as well to make sure that we're following all the proper food processing and food handling and food storage guidelines as well. Yeah.
I wish you guys could see the floor here at this warehouse. I would feel comfortable eating off of it, honestly. It's so clean. And I was kind of making the reference of like, when your mom comes in and she's like, hey, we have guests coming over. We have to make it look like no one lives here. So vacuum, everyone pick up the month's worth of clutter that has been on the floor. Everyone get their dirty laundry to the basement so no one sees it. I was like, this is really nice because I came in for a tour and I'm sure they didn't clean the warehouse just for me. So it was nice because it's very clean and I would feel comfortable eating food from here. Obviously, I've never been in a situation. I'm very blessed to have never been in a situation where I needed that. But I know families who do. I'm sure they appreciate the fact that it's clean and, it's taken care of and they're getting really good product. Yeah. Because I think one thing that I see a lot of is people are like, oh, well, they're hungry, like, anything goes. They still deserve dignity. People that are struggling with food security, obviously they still deserve the dignity of eating a good, healthy meal that has been prepared well. So, we were talking about volunteers. You guys have a really cool volunteer area set up here. And how does that work? Maybe like you were talking about the tree that we saw of like the hours donated. What do the volunteers look like coming through here? What's the process they do to sign up? How maybe we could get some people in here from our listenership.
Yeah. I mean, that would be fantastic. I just did want to comment really quickly on that we really appreciate and recognize the cleanliness of it because we take that very seriously. And you touched on one of the biggest things that is a very important value of ours is just because you're in a bad situation doesn't mean that you have to get bad food. Yeah. Because we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of that product and making sure that when it gets to that shelf to that person in need, that they don't think that they're getting something that's bad or something that's been cast off. Yeah. Because it's just as important for families to have good food that everybody else does.
Yeah, and it's nutritious.
Exactly.
That's what you were talking about with the backpack program. We try to give them within the USDA health guidelines. Right. And I know that I've seen so many people that are in those situations that have to make the buying decisions. They buy $1 bag of chips versus buying, something that's healthy, like from the fresh produce aisle. And so it's nice to see that they're getting non-perishable produce that, has been canned and prepared that way, but it's still healthy and nutritious. And so that's really cool. But yeah, the programs, that's all done with, we'll swing back. We're circling back.
Yes.
So volunteers.
Yes.
You guys have a lot of them. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So we have a variety of volunteers. Sometimes it can be from major employers that are here within Springfield. It can be retired folks that are looking for some extra work. We have all kinds of students from our 3 universities here in town that come to volunteer. And it can be a variety of different projects that they're working on. So that could be helping us pack food for our weekend backpacks or helping pack our senior boxes or just helping us sort food because that's one of our biggest is we have to sort more than 100,000 pounds of food every week at Ozarks Food Harvest. Just to make sure that none of our agencies have to worry about having empty shelves. Yeah. So we take that very seriously. We try and make this as seamless and easy as possible so all of our volunteers sign up online so that way they can see which shift is going to fit their specific needs. And we're trying to make that process easy so that way they can do it at their own convenience. Between either working in our warehouse or working on our glean team or even working out in our garden, we try and make that as frictionless as possible.
So what do they do when they're here? Like if they come in and they're like 4 hours, you got my time, what are you going to put them to work doing?
So typically we're going to have them come in, we're going to explain the food safety, the food sorting process to them just so they understand kind of what they're looking for. We have volunteer coaches supervising the whole time just to make sure that if anybody has questions or if something happens to be being sorted wrong, we can catch that when it's done. We make sure that everybody is washing and cleaning their hands and sanitizing. And then just kind of depending on the day, it can be sorting and packing that food on our weekend backpack line or the sorting of the food products. The egg days tend to be a little messier than some.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But yeah, just kind of depending on the luck of the draw. You could be sorting fresh produce. You could be sorting dry goods. You could be even sorting meat. Yeah. Just kind of whatever is needed that week and what we're seeing get donated within that week as well.
Yeah. So you were talking about, sorting meat. So do you see a lot of perishable things here? I guess like meat, eggs, milk, breads. Like what is the process of those since they are kind of more of a time constraint there?
Yeah. And so that's something that's really changed within probably the last 10 to 15 years in food banking, is because as more consumers have wanted fresh produce and meat items, and items kind of that fit within that category, we're starting to see that reflected in our donations. So that's been great that people that utilize our services can access that. So some of the ways that we handle our perishable food items is that we have massive refrigeration and freezer units. So at Ozarks Food Harvest, we have roughly 102,000 square foot warehouse, and 25% of that is made up of a freezer and refrigerator space. So that was very important to us when we initially built this building, because we wanted to make sure that people across our whole 28 county service area had access to fresh produce and meat items, not just the people here in Greene County. So because we have these massive refrigeration units, we can actually store that product that gets donated to us and make sure that it has the time to make it out across our service area. Because we want to make sure that everybody has access to eggs, everybody can access fresh produce, onions, carrots, all those things, to make sure that they're fulfilling all their nutritional needs.
So one of the programs that Missouri Farmers Care has is Hogs for Hunger. And they have opportunities to donate, ground pork, fresh ground pork to their local food banks. And we were talking a little bit about, sometimes they don't have proper refrigeration, and that's always a big issue and a hurdle that you face here. So what would you suggest if people are trying to look for a way to donate some fresh produce? What is ways that they could do that in an efficient manner directly to those agencies in order to kind of, not only get that product to the hands of hungry families, but also not overload the food banks that they're serving?
So if you're wanting to donate specifically to an individual food pantry, a good thing would be to check with them first to make sure that it can fit their capacity needs. Because one of the thing you definitely don't want is to overfill that and then have product go bad. So a really good way to get around that too is to contact the local food bank. So since we work with so many different agencies, depending on your county, we can connect you with a bunch of different services to make sure that it's getting spread out and it's actually going to hit as many families as possible. Just to make sure that there is as little food waste as necessary.
Awesome.
John isn't just a neighbor, he's a friend. So when he started acting differently and when he wasn't coming to the coffee shop every morning, I knew something was up. The stress of farming is real and affects everyone. So I spoke up and suggested John get help from the Agri-Stress Helpline for Missouri, where trained professionals who understand farming were ready to help. The call was free and confidential, and now he's back at Morning Coffee Talk. Don't wait. Make the call or text 833-897-2474 or find out more on the Missouri Department of Agriculture website.
We do take very seriously here too is the donations that we receive. Because one of the biggest ways that you can support a food bank is a monetary donation. I mean, food donations are also great, but because of the size and the capacity that we have more purchasing power than the average individual does here. So with just $1, we can turn that into $10 worth of groceries. So that's just an example of how far we can stretch that due to that capacity, warehousing, and distribution size across an entire service area.
I didn't realize how big of a factor purchasing power was in things like this until I got older into college, and I work in a flower shop during the school year, and we talk about purchasing power during Valentine's Day. You buy more roses, they get cheaper. So it's very interesting. I think monetary donations are a lot more convenient for people too. You donate online, you type in your credit card number, and you're like, hey, I just donated $10 worth of food to someone with just $1. So you were also talking about how seriously you take the resources here and how you distribute that out to agencies, and you were talking about a certification you guys got for financial transparency. Kind of fill us in on what that is.
So we had just recently received our 10th 4-star rating from Charity Navigator. So that's the world's largest evaluator of nonprofits. And so that measures a variety of subjects, but kind of the big ones are the financial accountability, the transparency, and the program expenses. So here at Ozarks Food Harvest, 96 cents of every dollar goes directly towards program expenses. And we're very serious about keeping it that way to not only make sure we're being good stewards of our dollar, but that's keeping our mission at hand of transforming hunger into hope at all times.
What does the other 4 cents go to?
Oh, that's towards administration expenses. So that's paying our staffing, helping out with any kind of programming needs or things like that.
So like basically all the people that keep the wheels turning.
Exactly.
With obviously the economy getting a little more tight, where have you seen that affect what your job is here to provide those meals with transportation costs, inflation, food purchasing costs, any of those things? Could you kind of tell us what you're seeing on your end?
It's really been a perfect storm for food banks here in Missouri. I mean, we're seeing increased prices for food, we're seeing increased prices for fuel, and then the supply chain delays are really affecting us. So just as an example, I mean, it used to take us maybe 2 to 3 months that we would order ahead of time for supply chain issues. But now to deliver turkeys for Thanksgiving, we already placed that order back in February.
Oh my.
So we're making sure to have that on hand. We're having to plan 6, 12 months ahead of time to make sure that that's going to be in place there.
Yeah.
And even with our fuel costs right now, we're spending about $1.4 million a year to get that out across our service area.
Yeah.
But that's a very important thing for our agencies because we deliver all of our food for free across the 28 county service area to make sure that all the agencies have to worry about is feeding the families within their county, not having to worry about how are we going to be able to afford this food or how are we going to be able to transport this food. Yeah. So we're trying to take those barriers away from them as well as just the increased cost is really affecting us. I mean, saltines, which are very, very hard to source right now, recently just cost us about $80,000 for a truckload, which is an increase of about 20% from what we've seen in previous years.
Saltine crackers, like
yes.
like the dip in the soup crackers.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure we were talking about the same thing. So you were talking about, how you guys don't let your agencies pay for any of the transportation costs. So obviously you're taking that on the chin. So where does that come out of? Do you guys have an incidentals? What, how are you taking that and rolling with the punches there? Right. So that just requires more fundraising on our part to make sure that we can continue to cover those costs. And I mean, a lot of that, just maintaining our truck system, we have more than 15 trucks that we're sending out each and every day. And making sure all of that maintenance capacity stays in there so that we can keep our 28 county service area happy and healthy. Cool. Awesome. So tell us the story about the tree and kind of just paint a picture in our mind for that, because I want our listeners to be able to experience what I experienced. It was kind of emotional for me to watch it. So yes, we have a what we call the Charles Foltz Gift of Time tree. And so we had actually had a staff member who designed the tree that is now hanging within our volunteer center. And that was to represent one of our longest volunteers, Charles Foltz, who has unfortunately passed now, but he was still volunteering at Ozarks Food Harvest up until the time he was 95 years old. He celebrated his 95th birthday here at OFH. And what that represents is the amount of hours that folks have contributed to our organization. So Charles sits at the top of contributing more than 4,000 hours here. And then we have different tiers of 3,000, 2,000, and 1,000. But we put that in our volunteer center because we really wanted to highlight how dedicated people are to this mission. And I think it really shows the good in this community that so many people are concerned with making sure that people are fed and that everybody has a meal to put on the table at night, just like your average citizen. Yep. So I think that's a great means of showing not only the dedication of our volunteers, but just the dedication of our community. Yeah, and just a quick shout out, I saw Logan Rogersville FFA on there. So good job, guys. And Missouri State University, obviously keeping it locked down here in Southwest Missouri. Which is great for just the fact that we are giving back as young people in agriculture and moving that forward and kind of sharing the goodwill that we all know and have experienced. Thank you for joining this week's episode of Stand for Ag, and thank you so much, Jordan, for sitting on the podcast. We enjoyed the tour and also hearing all that Ozark Food Harvest does, one of the 6 regional food banks here in Missouri.
Thank you for joining the Stand for Ag podcast with Missouri Farmers Care. We're excited to bring you new stories each week. We as agriculturalists have a lot of stories to tell. Stories of resilience, grit, and stories of families that are united by their passion for agriculture. Each week, tune in for a new episode and join the conversation.